Okay. First of all, thank you, Dr. Delta Chanda, for giving me this opportunity to welcome our today's eminent speaker, Dr. Shandipan Sharkar. Dr. Shandipan Sharkar is a distinguished engineer serving Cognitive Computing Center of Competence in IBM. In his career spanned over 2 decades, he has been taking on various technical leadership roles, and he has been responsible for crafting cutting-edge technical solutions and thought leadership to address business problems, intriguing business problems. Dr. Sharkar holds a PhD in computer science and engineering from Jadavpur University, India, and his research interest lies in computational linguistics, information retrieval, and machine learning. So, without further delay, I would like to request Dr. Sharkar to start his session. Thank you, sir.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, and my apologies again for joining a few minutes late. Apparently, the app that IBM doesn't use Zoom, so possibly, there was some issue with my machine. I installed the app, then it didn't work, and then uninstalled and tried browser, which apparently worked. So just wanted to share. I do not know whether Dr. Chanda, can you see my screen? I just wanted to ask you. There was a
Yes, sir, we can see. We can see you.
We can see.
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so I know that this is towards afternoon. Hopefully you guys are all safe. Kind of situation that we are all going through. I know that this is not something that we all expected. So I am sincerely hoping that all of you are safe and well. I know that possibly, over next 45 minutes, what I would like to talk about, I wanted to, share some of my reflection, because this is a topic that possibly you are hearing on many different forums. I'm assuming that you are all third-year students, and we have some of our professors here. So you keep on hearing about artificial intelligence, cognitive computing, etc., etc. I myself went to your campus, and I think 3-4 years back I delivered a speech at it. So the topic is nothing new, right? But this is a topic that is kind of there are a lot of advancements that are happening, right? Again, I am not an academician, so possibly, theoretically, I cannot talk much about it. But what I wanted to share, that while I am going through this journey over last few years, what kind of changes that I am seeing, right? And I wanted to talk about it from several different lenses, right? I hope. Can you hear me all right? I hope that I am audible. So
yes,
in case.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So it's about sharing some of my reflection, right? So and maybe some of these will be relevant for you. That's what I would So in case you. Sorry, any question? All right. I do not know whether you have heard something about bioluminescent fungus, right? So it's a kind of a fungi, right? So which glows during the night, right? And nobody knows, right? So why they glow, right? And there are certain theories that evolved over the period of time, right? For example, they glow during night time because that's when they can attract nocturnal insects, right? So that they could be, their spores could be spread in many different places, and that's how it grew. But whatever it is, it's a very curious relationship that they have built over the period of years with nature, with other species and whatnot. Evolution doesn't happen overnight, right? It takes a lot of time, right? What we are seeing, right? At this moment, there is a very curious relationship that itself is evolving between man and machine, right? And that's what we are going to talk about. Sorry, is there a way that we can go on mute? I think there are a lot of background noises, if you don't mind. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay. So
if you please mute yourself, or if you please mute yourself.
So, team, I mean, again, I mean, as I was talking about, this particular technology attracted lot of meat, right? Let us talk about it, right? Because many of these things were imagination, right? Some of these became a reality, some of these have not, right? For example, I mean, on the left hand side we see that some of the screenshots of Star Trek movies. Obviously, students, I mean, you have not seen this TV series. Obviously there are new Enterprise, new Star Trek franchises which are now being into movies, but not necessarily you have seen these screenshots from the TV series. Yeah. So, but it was an imagination, and I can still recall when I was a kid, right? We used to see this series, and I could still recall that when Captain Kirk, the captain of the spaceship, right, USS Enterprise, he used to sit at the bridge of the ship, and he used to speak to a computer, right? And the computer used to listen to his commands, used to respond and act, right? And sometimes it used to speak back to him in English, right? We know that we have already what was an imagination when I was a kid. I mean, it is already a reality today, right? All of you. I mean, now speaking to the mobile phone, right, with your Google Assistant or Siri or Cortana in your Microsoft machines, right? And it is actually taking your commands, or it can understand what you are saying. Some of you have Alexa at home, so it is understanding what you are saying, and it can actually respond to you, right? Sometimes in English, sometimes by playing a song, sometimes by finding a file and whatnot, sometimes taking a dictation from it, right? So what was an imagination that has actually become an invention? Yeah. But this journey, I mean, obviously, I mean, it took a lot of time, right? So I mean, I personally am doing bit of artificial intelligence work since my final year of my college. I mean, third year actually when I started, of your age, when I was. And I can still vividly recall we were writing a deep learning, not deep learning at that point of time. We used to call it, artificial neural net, right? I was writing a C program. I mean, when I was trying to create a neural net which can learn, some of our digits, right? So it can read some of the digits, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Yeah. So that was really, but even that was mid 90s, right? So we know that artificial intelligence started even before that. 1940s is exactly when we started talking about it. Yeah. But why all of a sudden artificial intelligence has become such an interesting phenomena, right? So if it started from 1940s, it was primarily a scientist's discussion, right? I mean, academics discussion. But nowadays everybody is talking about AI, right? So why so? Yeah, because of some reasons, because of some basic reasons, right, which were there for quite some time, but nobody had an answer towards it, right? And this is a chart that I often talk about, right? Murakami is one of my favorite authors, yeah. And this is a quotation that I picked up from one of his novels, right? So knowledge is a precious social asset. We all know about it, right? And that's why we try to share it with each other. And if there is anything that increases with sharing, that is knowledge. We all know about it. Yeah. The bigger challenge is that knowledge is captive. Yeah, and knowledge is captive within the mind of a brilliant brain, or a library, or some digital archives and whatnot. Yeah. When we need the knowledge, when we need that particular gyan, right, we often do not get it, right? So we struggle, we try to search, we try to find out, we try to speak, and then at some point of time we hope that okay, we'll get it, right? The question is, how can we really turn it into a social asset when everybody can have access to it? Yeah. So this is one of the primary forces why artificial intelligence becomes such an interesting discussion point. Yeah. So we all know, right? So in case you are reading, Harari, Professor Yuval Noah Harari's books, right? So we all know that the human history is actually going from one revolution to another revolution. Yeah. So we all know that there was something called cognitive revolution long back, right? So when there are multiple human species in the world. Homo sapiens was not just the one, right? Some of the species were far stronger than us, such as Homo neanderthals, right? And they had even more brain power. They were stronger than us, and etc. Yet and we actually, we cohabited this world for quite some time, right? Yet Homo sapiens not yet being such a strong species, right? Yet it ultimately managed to defeat Neanderthals, and there is no Neanderthal anymore, right? So only hominoid species that we can get today is Homo sapiens, right? There is no Homo erectus, there is no Homo neanderthals, right? Now every Homo species, every human species is gone, right? Whether this is good or bad, that's a different discussion, but that brings us to the question that, okay, so we human beings, Homo sapiens, so-called human beings, there are other human beings also. How come we became the most dominant species in this world? Yeah. Now, that is because of something like what you call cognitive revolution, right? Cognitive revolution in the sense that, okay, so we managed to kind of share knowledge, right? Share some of our ideas with each other. Then multiple Homo sapiens individual started to subscribe to this knowledge, to these ideas, right? And then that created a team, right? And some of these ideas could be about our nation, right? The concept of a nation, concept of a religion, right? Concept about a particular ism, right? Yet, that brought us together, right? So when we say that, okay, so this is our country that brings Indians together. When we say that, okay, I am a computer scientist, that brings all the computer scientists together, because we have a same value system, right? We subscribe to the same value system. So that actually created wonder, right? So when Homo sapiens actually managed to communicate, where their vocabulary was far stronger than other hominoid species, right? Thereby they managed to communicate with each other and created some concepts which brought them together. Then together they fought. Neanderthals never could achieve it, right? People say about you can actually, in your individual basis, you can only reach out to 150 people, right? That's a common theory, right? But if you have if you have an idea, right, in that case, that can bring thousands of guys together, maybe more than that, millions of guys together, right, subscribing to the same value system. Yeah. So that is one revolution, right? And then as you know, that there was an agricultural when from the hunt turned into an agrarian society, agrarian society. Agrarian society. Yeah. When we started to reap our harvests, right? And that was our primarily sustenance, right? And then we all know that about 200 years back, right, we had this industrial revolution. Yeah. And then we are now talking about industry 1.0, 2.0. Now we are saying we are at 4.0, right? So that is the fourth episode of industrial revolution. In all these revolutions of our history of mankind, right? One thing that we always followed, that is a pursuit of happiness, right? And in this pursuit, what we tried to create is essentially, we tried to bring machines or tools to make our life easier, right? And we went from one kind of tools to more sophisticated machines. Now we are talking about, okay, can we have machines which are sentient, which are intelligent, right? So that's where we are right now. Yeah. But we all know that there are, some, we had certain, advantages. Machines are certain advantages. And it worked really well for a while, right? So, for example, when steam engine was discovered, we all thought, okay, so steam engine is going to revolutionize the world, and it did, right? The travel started, the supply chain started and whatnot, right? When we had this new digital computer, that also revolutionized. When we brought in internet that connected the whole world digitally, right, connecting with each other, we started e-commerce business and whatnot. But yet, we are not happy, right? So we always want to get something more than that, right? So, and that is where, we wanted machines to be far more, capable, right? But the problem is that, machines also had certain limitations, right? For example, they cannot handle ambiguity. We human beings are actually very good at that, right? We can handle ambiguity. With a limited amount of, still take decisions, right? So, okay, fine, I do not know whether there will be rain or not, but I can take certain precaution. Oh, it seems like it will be raining, so okay, I will take an umbrella. So these are very little information. It's not that I am churning out a hell lot of data points. I mean, it's just about my feeling that tells me, right? Machines do not have a feeling. They cannot do anything like that. Another example is that, I mean, we are actually able to pick up new skills, right? So even if I have never played a sitar, right, if I'm new to it, maybe if I practice it for a week or so, I can at least, play Saregama, right? Maybe, right? But, if a machine is programmed to do, say, solving, traveling salesman's problem, right? Tomorrow it cannot ask him to do a face recognition, right? So that's not it cannot do it. So they are pre-programmed and they are rigid, so they do not pick up new things. The other challenge is that machine never interact. I mean, at least never interact with natural things, right? So obviously all these things have changed over the last few years. I mean, but the whole idea was that we wanted to get some tireless things, right? So machines are tireless, right? Yet they can actually get into a new problem domain, learn it, right, and then solve the problem, right? So that's the whole idea of cognitive computers, right, or intelligent machines. Now, in this pursuit, right? So there are many different ways of looking at how to define really art, right? So this is the dictionary definition that you have seen, right? So it is about learning, right? It is about understanding, right? It is about interacting naturally. Yeah. So typically these are the three things that we often associate, right, with cognitive computing or artificial intelligence, right? We take a computer which can actually get or what do you say, ingest a lot of data, a lot of information, right? And using that data, looking at the data, it can understand the underlying relationships of it, and thereby it can build a knowledge, right? The other thing is that it can actually understand the different intricacies. I mean, it can relate one problem with another, right? And that's the understanding part. And then at the last, I mean, you often see that that happens every day with your mobile phone nowadays. So nothing new. So it can actually interact with you more naturally. So if you speak to Google Assistant, it will speak back to you, right? So that's how it is. Yeah. Of course, it can give you some hilarious, experiences. On that day, we were using, I guess, Google Meet to chat. I mean, some of our friends were there. Nowadays, we cannot go out because of this lockdown and COVID. So we often do get into some adda over a Google Meet, and we turned on its transcripting feature, translation and transcripting feature. Since we are speaking in Bengali, it was giving us some hilarious, translations. But anyway, that's a different discussion. So that was what I just discussed. That is kind of a dictionary definition of cognitive computing, right? But there is a philosophical lens also, right? So when we try to address the whole idea of artificial intelligence, right? So we try to many different, brilliant computer scientists and philosophers and mathematicians to address it, right? And there are many different lenses that they do. Yeah. Now look at it, right? So I do not know how many of you are aware of Alan Turing. If you are from computer science background, I'm pretty sure that you are learning about Turing machine. So he is the gentleman. He is kind of the founding father of artificial intelligence, as we call it, right? We know that he was a brilliant mathematician. There is a fantastic movie right now that is there in Netflix, The Imitation Game, right? Benedict Cumberbatch. I mean, if you want to watch it, right? That is a biopic of Alan. He was there during obviously the Second World War, right?
So please mute yourself. Please mute yourself.
So obviously at that point of time, I mean, there were a lot of German cipher encrypted messages that are going back and forth. Sorry, can you go on mute, please? I cannot hear myself.
Request all the participants, please mute yourselves. Again, we are requesting all the participants, please kindly mute yourselves. The session is getting interrupted. Please understand and cooperate.
Thank you so much. But Alan Turing, right? So interestingly, he was a national hero because he actually decrypted the German messages, right? And that helped a lot for Allied forces to decide their, war strategy, right? And ultimately, as we all know, that Allied forces won Second World War. So by the end of Second World War, right? So he became a national hero, obviously, a brilliant mathematician. But you know what? I mean, he was a homosexual, right? And that was Victorian era. It was a crime, right? And he was actually convicted, right? And he was prosecuted, right? So that was a big shock for him. And as you know, that after that conviction happened, I mean, within 2 years, I mean, he committed suicide. I mean, it is really a sad part of our history, right? Such a brilliant mathematician, a national hero, and how the country which got so much benefit out of his work, right, became kind of turned him into a criminal, right? Such a shame. But you know what? I mean, that actually shaped a lot of our artificial intelligences, thinking, right? So when he was he in his own closed circuit, he used to talk about, right? So being a gay, I mean, he used to say that being a gay is not important, right? Or you will not be that much chased and stigmatized, right, by the society. But if the society perceives you to be gay, right, in that case you'll be stigmatized, right? So that's a very very deep thought from his own life, right? Quite interesting, his artificial intelligence thought, and that was actually influenced by that thinking on it. Yeah. So it was about he said that it doesn't matter whether the machine is intelligent or not. The question is whether the machine is perceived to be intelligent, right? So that is what is important, and that actually influences a lot of work around it. In fact, most of our artificial intelligence work today are essentially on that line. So in this chart, I tried to put it into two different dimensions, right? One is about human dimension versus rational dimension. I'll come there in a moment. Another one which I just discussed about is around thinking and acting, right? So what I just said, Alan Turing's philosophy was more about acting humanly, right? So can you fool others, right, that you are actually like a human being, right? That was his principle, and most of the artificial intelligence work that we see at bottom left corner. But it is also about whether you act it or not. I mean, it is also about thinking, right? Can you really think as a human, right? Can a machine really think as a human, right? So that's a different discussion altogether, right? And there are some research, not much, right, where we have where people are doing, where they are trying to create, I mean, machines, I mean, which can actually think humanly, right? Neuromorphic computers, deep learning in a way, artificial neural nets are in a way around it, but not exactly. They still belong to acting humanly. But thinking humanly is an area, right? So where people are trying to create, when they're hoping to create a machine which is actually like a true brain, right? Can truly think and act. Yeah. Now there are human versus rational, right? So we humans are actually biased. We have, we do make mistakes, right? But a rational being, which is obviously an ideal situation, right? I mean, that they do not make mistakes. They do not have any bias, right? They are beyond it, something like God, right? So can we create a machine which can act or think rational, right? So that is another area of research that is going on, right? So which will not be influenced by human bias, and that's a big topic nowadays, right? So as you know, that when we train a machine, right, in artificial intelligence, right, we give them data. Who generates this data, right? These data are being generated by human beings ourselves, right? And we all know that since human beings are biased, so when we are training the machine with that kind of biased data, the machine itself will also become biased, right? If I say that in an Indian scenario, that woman cannot act in a in a very difficult situation, right? Which is the normal social fabric in many parts of India, demands so, right? And if we train the machine with that kind of thinking, machine will also treat it that way, right? If there is a female case coming in, I mean, obviously he cannot be a commissioned officer or cannot be in a combat role in army or in air force, right? So that's the decision that machine will keep on giving, because that's the human thing, right? Now Israel doesn't do it, right? We know that in Israel, I mean, women can actually get into a combat position, right? So the question is, can we train the machine with in an Israeli situation, I cannot have that bias. Yeah. The other popular discussion that are going on, and there is taking a lot of thinking around it, right? We know that there are certain strata of society in the United States who are possibly involved in crime, right? But not everybody who comes with that kind of profile means that he is a criminal, right? So there is a cause and effect thing. So the question is, if just because a person is coming from certain background with certain skin color doesn't mean that he is going to be a defaulter and kind of be a fraud and will not be eligible for a loan, right? So that would be really bad. Yeah. Question is, how can we get rid of these biases, right? So that is about acting and thinking rational. So I just wanted to give that thought. This is the computer science definition of cognitive computing that you guys maybe are teaching. So essentially, or learning, right? So essentially, it is about you have a bunch of tasks, a same class of tasks, right? And you have a performance measure. Then, if it can actually learn from experiences, right, to perform those tasks, which is T, over the period of time, right? How do you define that? Because of the performance measure, you calculate the performance measure. In that case, I mean, it becomes a cognitive computing algorithm, right? So that's what we often talk. But here is an economic lens, right? So we all know that economists, right, are not necessarily very let us put it this way, right, very colorful personality themselves, right? They cut through all the hypes and romanticism and etc. etc. They see this world from demand and supply point of view. They often say that, guys, I mean, if you do not have a demand, I mean, then there is no supply, right? And vice versa, right? So look at it, right? So, I think there is an echo.
Pushpendu, are you here? Pushpendu? Please mute yourself.
So if we look at the algorithm, right, of a decision, right, or a prediction, right, as we call it, right, we see that what is happening over there, right? And this is an economics lens actually, right? We see there is an input that is coming in, right? It could be the input could be a data, right? It could be a profile, it could be an image, it could be a sound clip, it could be some data, right? Some structured data, which will come to the machine. The machine will do a prediction, right? Prediction about what could be the possible outcomes of it. Based on these predictions, right? Somebody will take an action, right? It could be a machine, it could be a human being, right? And that will give us some result, which is an outcome, right? And that outcome, right? What we see that outcome can be a good outcome, can be a good bad outcome. So, for example, when we are in a facial recognition, right? We are essentially saying that, guys, I mean, so yes, this is the face of Sandipan, or this is not a face of Sandipan. Okay. Now, if it is not the face of Sandipan, if it cannot recognize, so that means that the machine didn't predict it right. Yeah. So whether this is right or wrong, that information should be fed back to the machine so that it can improve, it could be retrained, right, and can be improved. And that's exactly what has been shown over here, the training. So all these things are sort of automated or semi-automated, right? So, but the question is, there is also an element of judgment that we need to apply, right? We human beings often apply, right? So when we look at the predictions, possible predictions that are coming out, right, we often try to see that whether there is what's the cost associated with it, right? And let us take an example, right? I have a pain in my leg, right? Now I go to doctor, right? The doctor can think of two possibilities. One is there is a cramp of muscle, right? Or some of my veins might be clogged with some blood clot or something, right? Could be one of these. The treatment for these two, predictions could be entirely different. If it is a muscle pain, right? So the possibly I need to take rest, right? If it is a blood clot, right? In that case, I need to take a blood thinner or some kind of medicine, right? So which will kind of take care of it. Yeah. But now blood thinners often come with some kind of bit of side effects, right? Which may not be very pleasant. Yeah. So the doctor will have to take a decision which way to go, right? So shall I recommend the patient to take some rest, or shall I recommend him some medicine to thin his blood, right? Now remember, right, if I recommend medicine, in that case he will have some discomfort, all right, and he may not like it. On the other hand, if it is truly a blood clot, right, if I do not treat it with medicine, in that case it could be a really life-threatening situation, right? But if it's just a question of taking rest or etc., in that case, I mean, there is no medicine involved. I mean, it's just a question of no unpleasantness or nothing, right? So how do I go? Every option has a cost associated. So that's where doctor's judgment come into play. Oh, so I can see that there is a bit of swelling, and there is apparently a patient said that he played football yesterday, so it could be a muscle pain. Okay, so why don't we try and ask him to take some rest? So that's the judgment that we often talk about, and that's where the economists come into play. So they are saying that, guys, just do not follow the predictions blindly. Try to find out the cost associated with it, right? Take a judgment, a human judgment, how we can play it. So guys, this is a very profound thought, right? Because this is we often hear about it, that okay, so will AI take away my job, right? Will AI supersede humans? Will the artificial intelligent machines or intelligent machines will take over the world from the humans, right? I personally believe that is not going to happen, at least very soon, maybe in another 100 years, if at all happens, right? I do not believe that we are going to take away, artificial intelligence is going to take away jobs or etc., etc. We still believe that there is an interplay between human and machines, right? That's not going to go away very soon, and that's exactly where the judgment comes to play, right? Machines will give you prediction, but you as the human expert should come and take a judgment whether it makes sense or not, right? So this is an extremely important piece. Now there are cases where the cost is not so high. We can afford to take an automated decision, completely automated decision based on a prediction. But where the cost is pretty high, in that case we cannot afford to. So that's where the judgment will come and play a role, right? And that is exactly where in medical science, when we suggest, for example, we have what's an oncology advisor. It is an advisor, it is not a doctor. It can only advise the oncologist, okay, so this is the treatment plan. The judgment and the final decision is left to the oncologist to take the decision, right? But there are other cases. For example, say loan approval, right? If we know that, okay, our machines are quite successful nowadays, if we know that, okay, with 95% confidence, if the machine says that loan should be approved, we go ahead and approve the loan automatically. If it doesn't, in that case, possibly, we want to pass it through a human agent to verify and check, yeah? So that's where the judgments and all the things are coming. So guys, so this is very, very important. There is a what you call an AI canvas, right? So this is a framework that University of Toronto has developed, right? So where we put this into these 5 or 6 different boxes and 7 different boxes and try to see that how it works. And there are some examples. So I think that I tried to talk a little bit about how artificial intelligence or cognitive computing can be seen from different lenses, right? But let us see that how does it really, why, these different kind of models, what are the different kind of models that are there, right? And in case if this is another quote that I love, right? So most of us, right? So this whole artificial intelligence stuff is actually inspired by nature, right? So part of it is statistical, yes, it is, right? But it is essentially trying to mimic a human, right? So thereby it is there in the nature and we are just limiting, right? Anthony Gaudi is a famous architect, a Catalan architect, a Spanish architect. In Barcelona, there are quite a few of his works are there. Quite interestingly, most of his buildings are inspired by nature, right? So it mimics a weathered, stone, or it mimics a bone structure, or it mimics a forest and stuff like that. So very advanced now. So I will just give some of the examples. Many of these things are kind of known to you. So in case you are in third year, so I do not know whether you have machine learning class, right, artificial intelligence class, but in case you are following it, there is a very simplistic one, what we are calling it a decision tree. So there are many different artificial intelligence algorithms that we often talk about. What is a decision tree? That we have a bunch of data, we do not know the rules, right? So what rules are there? So from the data, we try to discover that what rules were there. Yeah. So there are algorithms which can take the data and then find out a kind of decision tree. I mean, in case if you are into programming, you know that we often implement a decision tree into our programs. How? By using if then else, or case statements and etc., right? So what does it do? It essentially takes you to a particular execution path till it reaches to a conclusion when you can return a value. So this is exactly that. Only thing is that in case of programming such kind of modules or functions, you know beforehand that what would be the against this if then else structure. Here you do not know. You have just a data, huge amount of data. You need to identify those conditional rules by analyzing that data, right? You can do it yourself, and many of us, many of the people are good at doing it. But if you have a large amount of data, that's exactly where I talked about. Human brain gets fatigued, right? They cannot process it, they cannot understand it, right? So that's where machines come handy, and this is where we put an algorithm called decision tree. This is very interesting. I mean, this is a data that is, I mean, it's quite famous data actually. Titanic mishap, right? So this is actually a decision tree of Titanic. So who had the chance of, far better chance of, survival in a Titanic disaster, right? Quite interesting. I mean, not quite interesting, nothing surprising. People found that by analyzing the data. I mean, obviously, if it was a kid or a woman, they had the better chance of survival. Obviously, women and kid and older people were given the lifeboats much beforehand, right? The other thing that people quite interestingly, I mean, discovered that people on the higher class, right, had the higher chances of survival, right? Because obviously they were offered, right, because of commercial reason, the lifeboat much beforehand than the deck people and etc., right? So this is, but this was actually, I mean, from the manifest, the manifest, right? I mean, the data about the passengers of an aeroplane or a ship, right? So actually, from the manifest, they analyzed this and they came up with this particular decision. The other one that we were talking about is the deep learning. I mean, this is quite interesting because, I mean, and I'm pretty sure that many of you will be doing it, right? So, I mean, for example, right, I should not take this example because IBM's official position is that we will not be doing any facial recognition anymore, right? But all of us, I mean, use Facebook in one form or other, right? So what do we do often there? I mean, we have seen that if we upload a picture, it often recognizes the face of my friend and it suggests, shall I tag, shall I tag, shall I tag? We say yes, yes, yes. I have not seen a case when it kind of identified one of my friends. I mean, it is pretty good at that. Either it doesn't, or when it suggests, usually it is very accurate. In most of the cases, it suggests. So how does it happen, right? So it happens, I mean, because of an algorithm. They use a deep learning algorithm over there. What is deep learning algorithm? It kind of mimicking our brain, right? We all know that our brain is a set of neurons are there, nerve cells are there. The nerve cells themselves are not very exciting. They are very simple kind of cells. In case, if you can recall your school days, right? They are not very exciting, very sophisticated cells. But what makes our brain very unusual and very interesting, right, is essentially the interconnection, right? Interconnection of these nerve cells. So they are heavily interconnected with each other. Yeah. So in case you are not aware that how big our neocortex, where most of our decision making power and recognition and cognition power is there, is a place, I mean, what we call neocortex of our brain, neocortex, neo as in neo, right? This neocortex size, do you know that how big it is? I mean, if you just flatten it out, right, it's just a very thin, structure, which is obviously there are a lot of curves, valleys and hills, right? If you just flatten it, it's something like an handkerchief, right? A male handkerchief, a gent's handkerchief, right? It is that small, right? How thin it is, how thick it is. I mean, if you put six visiting cards one top of another, right? That is the thickness that we talk about. So imagine a computer of that size, which can recognize the people, which can, call out people's name, which can recite a fantastic poem, who can render, who can do a nice rendition of Raga Malkosh, right? A fantastic, painting that can come out, and then, solving all the problems in the world, right? Can we have such a computer, right? Answer is no. We are nowhere near that. But to mimic that, I mean, what we are doing nowadays, that we are trying to create algorithms, right? Where we are trying to place very small computational units, which are kind of designated like this, circles or ellipses over here, and who are heavily interconnected with each other. So we give the input. These inputs are passed from one computation unit to another, right, and multiple, right, through some connections. These connections have some weights, right? These weights gets multiplied with the value that is being passed to these connections, and it reaches to the next cell, right? And we carry it on, and we get the output on the right hand side. Yeah. Then we compare the result. If we see the result is giving us an error margin, in that case, what we do from the right hand side, we keep on adjusting or readjusting the weights of each one of these connections, right? We use an algorithm which is called backpropagation algorithm, right? There are many variations of this kind of architecture, but this is the most simple one. Yeah. So this is what we call deep learning, something like a brain, right, where there are multiple layers of neurons. Yeah. It can go into any level, right? So for example, I mean, in our visual cortex, how we see the world, right? So through our eyes, right? We actually, people, the neuroscientists and computer scientists came together, right, and to create a model like that. And we have something called what we call the CNN model, right? So that is another convolution neural net, right? That is another model that is coming, right? And then there are sequence problems that we talk about. Often we talk about the time series problem, right? What is a time series problem? So today we have a value like this. Today's sale is, let us say that I have a restaurant, right? Today's I have a sale of, say 20,000 bucks, right? Tomorrow it is predicted that it will be, raining. What would be the expected sell out of it? So it's a sort of a time series that we move from one space to another, one time snapshot to another time snapshot, and we try to predict that what would be the value over there, right? So thereby there is a sequence that is important, and there is a, what we call, there is a recurrent neural net, another architecture which is there kind of at the bottom of this chart, which kind of creates a sequence of it. So this is another example of artificial intelligence algorithm, let us put it this way, right? Though this area is a new area, lot of promises. I talked about CNN, right? Convolutional neural net. Quite interestingly, I mean, it has been proven mathematically the CNN models are far capable at image recognition than humans, right? So we have made great progress over there, right? But not necessarily everything will be there. I mean, in case you are into natural language processing, machine translation, etc., that's where the bottom kind of models, RNN kind of model, right, comes handy, right? You have often see that while you are typing a message into WhatsApp or something, your keyboard often gives you a suggestion what should be the next word that you should type, right? You can choose it sometimes, right? And sometimes you see that it is really intuitive, right? How does it happen? That's through a time series problem, right? A kind of an recurrent sequence problem that we talked about. Usually RNN type of models are put over there. Yeah. So that's I know that it's a very I have just few minutes left, so very quickly I will talk about few forces. I mean, maybe another 2 minutes, and then I'll see that if you have any questions around, right? So the question is how it is expected to evolve, right, over the period of years. And this is our point of view. This is IBM's point of view that we talked about. So we believe that the more and as we move on, right, the interaction is going to be far more personalized, right? So the machines will understand you far better, right, and then interact with you, I mean, accordingly, right? It's not like same answer for everybody, right? And we do that. Even if, I mean, I know that when my parents will ask me how are you, and when my friend will ask how are you, my answers will be quite different, right? That is a personalized interaction, right? The other thing that is going to govern is about what is the autonomy of learning, right? I mentioned earlier that we human beings are very good at picking up new skills. Machines are not, right? Why? Because machines need human teachers, right? And we also need human teachers, but we also pick up few things on our own. And as we grow, right, as we our capability to pick up new skills increases, then it also diminishes once you reach middle age and etc. etc. That's a different discussion, right? The question is, can we bring unsupervised learning capability, autonomous learning capability to the machines? We are at a very nascent phase, I mean, a stage, I mean, we have not made a lot of progress over there, right? The other thing is that, I mean, how today, I mean, we are very good at natural language processing. We are more or less good at image recognition. Video analytics is still a new area. I mean, about the auditory senses, we are making good progress. About olfactory senses, how we smell, I mean, we are nowhere. I mean, absolutely nothing. I mean, not absolutely nothing. There are some research, but nothing worthwhile, right? So how can we, make use of all the senses that human beings usually sense and can, interpret, right? So that's another area where it is supposed to evolve. And the other anywhere that we would like to go, how ubiquitous it will be, right? And that is very important, right? Because as we said, I mean, Murakami said that knowledge is a precious social asset, right? Unless and until the AI is ubiquitous, this knowledge will not be at your fingertips. Good progress over there, because many of the AI agents are sitting at your mobile phone itself and your car, your washing machine and whatnot, right? In future, it could be far more ubiquitous, right? The other thing that will govern is, I mean, essentially how, as the machine capabilities are increasing, these new capabilities are coming up, the machine's computation power is also need to increase. Otherwise, I mean, it cannot scale up, right? So that's where a lot of researches are happening nowadays. I mean, that GPUs, graphical processing units, are being reused, right? We know that FPGA, floating point gate array, so that kind of new cheap architectures are coming, where you can burn a particular neural net and you do not have to run any software. It will be on the firmware itself, on the hardware itself, right? So that kind of changes are happening, but a lot more need to happen. I mean, we were nowhere. The other thing that we are talking about, the quantum computer, right? So that has a lot of promise, obviously at a very early stage again, right? But in case, I mean, it can really deliver a fraction of the promises that we are getting. It can change the whole cognitive computing discussion altogether, the scalability discussion. So I think that's where I will stop, right? And I will see that in case there is any other question from you. So what do you, Professor Chani?
Thank you, Dr. Sarkar, for such a fascinating talk. The cognitive computing, which is basically simulating the human mind. You have given us an insight into a philosophical dive into that world, giving us what the industry is doing, what the industry is thinking in that direction, and indicating our students that this is the new focus area of the industry, so they can also focus on that area. Thank you very much. Now I request Professor B.N. Chatterjee sir to say a few words. Sir, can you hear us? Sir, I think you are muted.
Hello? Hello,
Yes,
Shweta,
sir, we
you
can hear. Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Yes.
Sir, how
Sir,
are you?
welcome to the session.
How are you?
Fine. Yes. Dr. Sandeepan Sarkar, I am very happy to hear you after a long time, particularly at this hour. So I should say best wishes, and I am very old person and say blessings to you. Keep well. It is my best wishes to everybody. First of all of you should be very well at this time, because lot of things are expected from young persons like you. Now, Dr. Sarkar has given an excellent introduction to this very interesting and timely topic. In fact, this is going on for a very, very long time. As Dr. Sarkar has mentioned, artificial intelligence is existing from 1940 onwards, but it has become very important for last 20-25 years, because it is aiding human being in many respects. Actually, I have worked in the area of pattern recognition, image processing for more than 50 years. Now, I remember when I started my work, that time I used to use the word recognition, and cognition was pre to recognition. That means if you want to recognize, first of all you have to cognize. For cognition, we used to, means as our brain used to do, is to get some features, and we used to store, and during recognition we used to use those features. For example, I give this example. I used to give this example at IIT Kharagpur when I used to teach my students. We have two gods, Ram and Krishna. If you want to recognize them, then as far as the body features are concerned, both of them are almost the same. See, if you see the complexion, if you see their way, then if you want to store in the brain features, you will not be able to identify. Therefore, something more, behavior, action, other things are also important. For example, in Ram, we have bow and arrow, and for Krishna we have got Sudarshan Chakra or many other things. So, cognition is not only this, behavior and other things are also important. Dr. Sarkar has illuminated these things excellently, and in future I am sure many of our students and faculty members will be interested to have work in this area. In fact, some of them are working, others may also like to do. But remember, for doing this, as an elderly person, I want to say a few things. First of all, you should have a very good knowledge not only of computer programming, artificial intelligence, and you should have a very thorough knowledge of signal processing, and in mathematics, statistics, as well as, this is my personal opinion, little bit knowledge of tensorial analysis, because as Dr. Sarkar mentioned, you have to work with a huge amount of data, and therefore normal matrix algebra may not be sufficient, tensorial analysis. I think these are some of the comments I want to make at this point. Let me not make the thing a big lecture. And again, I want to thank Dr. Sarkar, Professor Jaita Chanda and other organizers for arranging this excellent, timely and very important topic. With this, again, my best wishes and blessings, because probably I am the oldest person here today. To everybody, have a very nice time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dean Sir, for this very insightful talk. You have added more light to today's topic, cognitive computing. I would now request Dr. Joyita Chanda, Coordinator of IIPC and Associate Professor from Computer Science and Engineering Department, to give the vote of thanks to today's session. Thank you.
Thank you, Devashish. Honorable Speaker of the session, Dr. Sarkar, respected Professor B.N. Chatterjee, sir, and all the participants here. I, on behalf of Industry Institute Partnership Cell of the Institute, extends a very hearty vote of thanks to everyone who blessed us with their presence here. I extend our deep sense of gratitude to Dr. Sandipan Sarkar, who is a stalwart in this field, to give us a glimpse of work done in cognitive computing from industry perspective. The session was a very enriching one, which stimulates I think that it will stimulate the young mind of the student. We are fortunate to have him here. I also wish to express my gratitude to Professor B.N. Chatterjee for providing encouragement. I'm very grateful to Principal Madam, Professor Dr. Shutka Mukherjee, for giving us an opportunity to organize this event. As no program can become successful with a single person, so I extend my big thanks to IIPC team members for making this webinar a success. Now I handed over the session to Mr. Devashish Bokshi, who is the coordinator of this webinar session.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you everyone for this participation. We really appreciate the kind of discussion we had today on cognitive computing, and I hope the students who have participated in this session.
If anyone have any question, you can write this on the chat box, or you can write to. If you have any question, you can raise your hand. Any question for anyone?
কথা বলিস না বলছি না বারবার ওকে কিছু বোঝানো যায় না ভুলবে কেন
Okay, in that case, I think we can
Yes, so let us
complete this session.
Can you give a big hand to Sandipan? Everybody clap. Yes.
Yes,
Thank you.
Dr.
Thank you, sir.
Somnath.
No, fine. It's excellent talk. Everybody give a big hand.
Yeah, I think.
But
All of you, all.
Yes. Thank you, Sandipan. Thank you, BSC sir. Thank you, Joyita, Fultuli, Sudipta, for arranging the excellent talk. Thank you.
All of you play. We can switch on your camera so that we can take a picture. All of you switch on your camera. All the participants are requested to switch on your camera for a group photo.
Sandipan is there or left us? Sandipan.
No, Sandipan sir is there. Sandipan sir.
Where? Sandipan. Sir, কেমন আছেন? How are you, sir? BSc sir? ভালো। স্যার অফ করে দিলেন ভিডিওটা।
Arijit can take the group photo.
All of you, please put your camera on.
But whenever I'm requesting for camera on, I beg to differ with Sandipan and several accounts, but he is much more knowledgeable, that I think the AI is taking up the lots of jobs. Like you see right now the chess player. The chess player AI is unbeaten now. Now it can play, so no grandmaster can beat. So they are taking up jobs.
Is on mute.
Oh, so that is
screen share top করতে হবে
I think Sir is saying some words. Sir is heading some words. Sir, you can speak.
Yes.
You want to add something to the session, right?
No.
So then, please, sir.
Yes. So BVNC sir can speak.
Please.
screen share to be off
Sir, your students are doing so many hackathon problem in this domain. So if you can share some knowledge with us, that will be very good.
No. Today, what Sandipan said, excellent talk. But some points that I think that like the post-COVID area, like teleconferencing, video conferencing, will take up much of IT jobs at the desk jobs. So it will be replaced by a lot of different type of workers, maybe the homemakers, houses can do a lot of job. So total job scenario might change. The lot of skill set might be changed. AI will come into this, and we have to be equipped with. They have to always share the knowledge, because nobody has to come to office right now. It has already COVID shown that they unnecessarily go to office and takes the office space, use the petroleum energy and all these things. So there's a good point to learn here in the post-COVID, and not post-COVID. It is a during COVID lockdown period. Supposed to be lockdown period. When the lockdown is open, there are no more cases of this thing. So AI can play a role. We have to be equipped with that, and AI plays role in every corner of the programming right now. He is correct.
Only thing that is
Shondipan
constant in
sir.
this world, that is the change.
Yes.
Shondipan
Yes,
sir,
Yeah.
if you can please close your screen share so that we can take the
Ah.
group photo.
Oh, okay. Hang on a second. So I need to see.
Yeah, I think
Switch
it's
to,
done. I
how
think
do
it's
I-
done.
It's done. Yeah.
I think it's done, sir. It's done.
BNC sir is always young. He is never old. He always energizes us, and he's a
Yes,
great
I agree,
inspiration.
sir.
And
Orijit, you can take the group photo now.
Done.
thank you,
It's done.
thank you,
Okay.
Thank you.
thank you,
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you so much.
So we
Take
can
care.